Today, we will use a scientific perspective to explore the complex truth behind meteorological events. According to the latest news from the CBS website, on December 4th, Hurricane Meiteorological approached, bringing heavy rain and super floods and hitting the southern Indian city of Chennai. Streets in much of the city of about 12 million people are underwater as severe cyclonic storms continue to batter India's coastline. Parts of Tamil Nadu state capital Chennai and neighboring areas received nearly an inch of rain overnight as a powerful storm swept across India's southeastern coast in the Bay of Bengal. The Chennai airport suspended operations at least till Monday evening as heavy rains flooded the runway and strong winds arose. Airport authorities cancelled 70 flights and diverted more than 30 others to Kempegowda Airport in neighboring Bengaluru city. Airport ground staff inspected parked planes in nearly knee-deep water. The scene was unbelievable. Thank you for liking, leaving comments, subscribing and turning on the little bell. We will update every day. Many cars were washed away by floods on the streets of Chennai. Waterlogging also forced the cancellation of at least 6 trains in the coastal state. Indian state authorities issued warnings ahead of the cyclone's landfall. As heavy rains began to pour on Monday, schools and colleges were closed and employees were urged to work from home. Thousands of people along the coast were evacuated and officials set up 5,000 relief camps for them on higher ground. Cyclone Meiteorological was a severe cyclonic storm in the southwestern Bay of Bengal on December 4th, moving north-northwest along the coast at about 9 miles per hour. India's National Weather Service warned that the cyclone was making landfall in the coastal state of Andhra Pradesh, with sustained winds of up to 62 miles per hour. The government of Andhra Pradesh said that as the cyclone moved north, it uprooted trees and submerged at least 25 villages, and authorities evacuated more than 15,000 people to safety before the cyclone made landfall. Warm waters in the Bay of Bengal have spawned several deadly cyclones over the past few years, causing massive damage in India and Bangladesh. In 2020, Cyclone Amphan killed at least 80 people and left thousands homeless in India. In 2019, Cyclone Fani displaced millions of people in Odisha, another coastal state in India. In 1999, a super cyclone hit Odisha, killing around 10,000 people. Most parts of India have a tropical monsoon climate, mainly because India is located in the subtropics and is close to the equator, so it is greatly affected by the monsoons of the Indian Ocean and the Arabian Sea. Specifically, the summer in India is from March to June every year. During this period, the sun shines directly on northern India, heating a large amount of ground, and at the same time, the air pressure in northern India drops. At the same time, the water temperature in the Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea is significantly lower than that of the land. The combined effect of this temperature difference and pressure difference causes a large amount of moist air in the ocean troposphere to flow into the Indian interior. When this moist air encounters terrain obstacles such as the Himalayas, it is forced to rise, where water vapor condenses and produces a large amount of precipitation. This rainy season climate formed by ocean water vapor and high temperature is India's tropical monsoon climate. Most parts of India are under this climate, especially the Ganges River basin and the southeastern coast. Throughout the summer monsoon season, these areas can account for 70% to 90% of the annual rainfall. Heavy concentrated rainfall can easily cause rivers and lakes to swell in a short period of time, causing large-scale ground flooding. With the impact of global warming, India's summer temperatures are increasing day by day, and the water vapor content in the air is also getting higher and higher. This makes the intensity of rainfall continue to increase, and the frequency of heavy rains also increases. If the flood control system and urban drainage facilities cannot keep up with this change, urban waterlogging and flood disasters will be inevitable. So to put it simply, India, as a tropical monsoon climate area, will experience large-scale climate systematic precipitation at the same time every year. This type of high-density and high-intensity rainfall can easily cause floods under certain conditions. If the relevant infrastructure and disaster prevention system are not perfect enough, India will suffer severe floods every monsoon season. First of all, India's population is mainly concentrated in the floodplain areas of major rivers. This is first of all related to the fertile land and developed agriculture in these areas. The Ganges River Basin Plain, the Indus River Basin Plain, and the valley plains of many other large rivers are the most fertile agricultural areas in India. These rivers flood every summer and bring a large amount of silt, which is deposited to form fertile alluvial soil. At the same time, these areas are also extremely flat and open, making them very suitable for large-scale mechanized agriculture. Over thousands of years, India's most advanced irrigation and water conservancy facilities were built in these plain areas. It can be said that the alluvial plains of major rivers such as the Ganges are the areas with the largest habitable area, the most fertile land, and the highest agricultural productivity in India. 80% of India's population depends directly or indirectly on agriculture. It is an objective law that population gathers towards resources. Therefore, a large number of farmers settled here in history, and a large number of villages, towns, and cities came into being. To this day, these areas still bear almost all of India's food production tasks and are the most densely populated areas in India. However, these low-lying plains, which are bound to flood every year, are also subject to higher flood risks. Especially today with climate change, the impact of river floods caused by heavy rains on these areas is increasing. At the same time, the easy occupation of urban land has also destroyed the original natural flood storage spaces such as rivers, lakes, and wetlands in these plains. Second, mangroves, wetlands, and other natural vegetation are important in slowing down and absorbing floods. Their massive destruction is also a key factor in increasing flood disasters in India. Specifically, mangroves are mainly distributed in coastal areas in tropical and subtropical regions. Their root systems form a network that can effectively block the advance of floods and protect the interior from storm surges and seawater intrusion. At the same time, the sediments surrounding mangrove roots can also store large amounts of fresh water carried by seawater. Mangroves are therefore called ecological dams. However, in recent years, a large number of mangroves in India have been deforested and reclaimed for tidal flat farming and commercial development. In the 8 years from 2006 to 2013 alone, Bangladesh lost at least 184,000 hectares of mangroves. This undoubtedly increases the vulnerability of India's coastal areas to storm surges and flooding. In addition to mangroves, other wetlands and natural vegetation such as reed swamps, and woods also play an important role in flood storage. They are covered with river banks, lakes, or low-lying basins, which can not only block the spread of floods, but also store a certain amount of floods. The loss of large areas of wetlands in India's major river basins has deprived inland areas of important sponges. Floods are easier to form and more difficult to control effectively. As a result, a large amount of natural vegetation was destroyed, which also weakened the flood storage, purification and regulation functions of the ecosystem. Rainfall is easier to gather into flood peaks and cannot be absorbed gradually. This is especially obvious in urban areas, where a large number of green spaces, woodlands, and grasslands have been replaced by concrete buildings, making it easy for heavy rainfall to accumulate in the city, causing serious waterlogging. It can be seen that the reduction of mangroves, wetlands, and other natural vegetation has destroyed India's most important natural flood storage system, and is an important reason for its increasingly serious flood disasters. This requires great attention and proactive protection and restoration measures. In addition, most areas in India, especially poor and rural areas, lack flood control infrastructure, which is mainly related to poor economic conditions and insufficient government investment in these areas. Specifically, the construction of infrastructure such as flood control dams, regulating reservoirs, and drainage systems requires a large amount of capital investment. This is a greater challenge for poor and rural areas with underdeveloped economic conditions. Taking the construction of flood control dams as an example, the materials and construction costs are very high, which is a heavy economic burden for remote areas that lack financial resources. At the same time, the water conservancy infrastructure construction in these poor areas has not received sufficient attention and investment from the government for a long time. The government's fiscal revenue is limited, and priority is given to the construction needs of cities and developed areas. Water conservancy construction in relatively backward rural areas seriously lacks financial support, and planning and construction are also lagging behind, making it difficult to form a scientific and reasonable flood control system. People in poor and underdeveloped areas also have poor awareness of flood prevention. They only temporarily strengthen prevention and control after a disaster occurs, but cannot form regular flood prevention preparations. The monitoring and early warning capabilities of local water conservancy departments are also weak. The superposition of various factors makes it impossible to establish a complete flood prevention and disaster reduction system in these areas. It should be noted that rapid and disorderly urbanization will cause flood control and drainage systems to be overwhelmed, which is mainly reflected in two aspects: urban construction overload and unbalanced pipe network growth. First of all, India's urban population is growing rapidly, and urban construction density is getting higher and higher, exceeding the original planning capacity and environmental carrying capacity. However, the flood control and drainage pipe network and other municipal facilities cannot be expanded simultaneously and remain at a low planning standard, making it difficult to adapt to the rapidly growing drainage demand. Secondly, during the process of urbanization, a large number of green spaces and low-lying areas have been destroyed and occupied, which itself is the most important drainage and flood storage area in the city. Its lack directly weakens the city's ability to adapt to heavy rain. The replacement of concrete floors increases the load on the drainage system. In addition, with the rapid increase of illegal buildings and transportation facilities, the corresponding underground pipe connections are often not perfect. This makes it difficult for rainwater to be effectively drained into the pipe network and can only accumulate on the surface, aggravating waterlogging. More importantly, the urban pipe network itself has problems such as unreasonable layout, small diameters in some pipes, and occupation of some river ditches by construction, which make it difficult to drain accumulated flood water and form an obvious drainage bottleneck. At present, India can improve the construction of the flood control system through comprehensive measures. First, it is necessary to assess the risk and vulnerability links of the national water system and identify flood-prone areas and important lines of defense. Build and strengthen flood control dams in these river sections and key nodes to improve their flood resistance standards and ensure the defense capabilities for a once-in-a-100-year flood. This requires sophisticated hydrogeographic information assessment methods. Secondly, it is necessary to rationally lay out the construction of small and medium-sized flood regulation and storage reservoirs, and form a flood regulation and storage network system. This type of reservoir can intercept inflows nearby, slow down flood peaks, and has a certain water storage capacity. However, its scale and storage volume must be scientifically demonstrated, and both flood control standards and project economics must be considered. At the same time, it is necessary to establish and improve the monitoring and early warning system for river and lake water levels and flows, realize the sharing of meteorological and hydrological information, and improve the accuracy of early warning, and establish a reserve warehouse of flood control materials to prepare for emergencies. In addition, it is necessary to speed up the construction of urban pipe networks and adopt the runoff pipe network dual-line model to ensure the smooth flow of urban flood control and drainage pipe networks. Properly set up regulation and storage nodes to prevent overloading of the pipe network, and regular dredging and maintenance. What cannot be ignored is the integration of flood control system construction with ecological projects such as lake wetland restoration and shelter belt construction. Give full play to the synergy of system engineering and create a hardware plus software joint defense system. The construction of the flood control system also requires further improvement of the operation and maintenance system, emergency response plans, and regional collaboration mechanisms. Only through comprehensive and systematic advancement can the maximum effectiveness of flood control be achieved. It is worth noting that India can restore natural flood storage space through the following policy measures. First of all, important wetland and mangrove protected areas must be designated, and occupation and destruction must be strictly prohibited. On this basis, wetland restoration areas are delineated, and natural growth forces are used to guide the spread of wetland vegetation and gradually restore the integrity of the ecosystem. Secondly, it is necessary to establish a reward and subsidy mechanism for wetland and mangrove protection. Provide appropriate subsidies to enterprises and village collectives that voluntarily protect wetlands, and encourage them to participate in pollution control and wetland forest restoration work. And include wetlands in the carbon sink trading mechanism to generate revenue. At the same time, for the partially occupied wetland hinterland, light engineering measures such as water control projects can be adopted to restore hydrological conditions. Reduce drainage standards and extend retention time to create conditions for wetland vegetation restoration. What cannot be ignored is the delineation of restoration zones on both sides of inland rivers and the use of vegetation and biological measures to restore riparian wetland pastures. This can not only widen the river channel and increase the flood discharge section, but also store floods in adjacent areas and slow down the flood peak. In addition, promote the concept of natural planning and retain and restore wetlands and lakes in low-lying areas in urban areas. This is the city's green lung and has the function of storing floods and reducing disasters, achieving a win-win situation for both the economy and ecology. A scientific monitoring and evaluation system should also be established to fully evaluate the ecological and economic benefits of wetland restoration. And we continue to summarize and promote successful experiences, using the two-wheel drive of market and policy to form a virtuous cycle of flood storage space recovery. Thank you for liking, leaving a message, subscribing and turning on the little bell. We will update the latest news from around the world every day. Continue to use a scientific perspective to explore the complex truth behind meteorological events.